The chamber smelled like old decisions. Admiral Sira Voss had been in a lot of important rooms in her life, and she had noticed that they all shared this smell, something between polished stone and the breath of too many important people saying too many important things for too many years. The Galactic Alliance Council chamber on Velthara Prime was the worst of all of them. It smelled like 700 years of other species making decisions about humanity and calling it cooperation. She sat at the human delegation table and looked at the agenda printed in her hand. The paper was real. The Alliance liked real paper for formal sessions. Humanity had brought real paper too, though the protocol officer at the door had given Voss a long look when he saw her thermos. Coffee was not permitted in formal sessions, he told her. She had smiled at him and kept the thermos. She read the agenda again. Item 7. Humanity's petition for membership tier reevaluation. She folded the paper in half. Item 7. Between a V-Horan grazing rights dispute at Item 6 and the afternoon recess at Item 8. Humanity had submitted this petition 19 months ago. They had waited. They had been patient. They had done what the Alliance always told them to do. They had followed the process, submitted the forms, waited in the chairs assigned to them. Those chairs were 14 meters from the center dais, 3 rows behind the Tharan block. She had measured the distance herself the first morning because she needed to know if she was imagining it. She was not imagining it. The chamber filled slowly. 7 species settling into their seats, adjusting their translation earpieces, arranging their water or their nutrient tubes or whatever it was they drank in formal sessions. The Tharan block arrived last, as they always did, because arriving last when everyone is already seated is a very old way of reminding a room who it belongs to. Velkath of the Tharan conclave was the last of them all. He was 400 years old, and he moved like it meant something. Long robes, pale silver, the kind of face that had learned a long time ago that composure was more powerful than any weapon. He nodded at Voss as he passed. She nodded back. The session opened. Item 1, Item 2. The room moved through its business with the slow rhythm of something that had been doing this for centuries and saw no reason to change. Voss sat straight in her chair. She drank nothing from her thermos. She kept her hands flat on the table. She thought about 32 years. 32 years of human ships running cargo routes that no other species wanted to touch. 32 years of human engineers maintaining infrastructure on stations the Alliance built, named after Alliance founders, and forgot to staff. 32 years of human soldiers dying in border conflicts that the Alliance called defensive operations and filed under miscellaneous in the budget. 32 years of her people being useful the way a floor is useful, present, necessary, and never once thanked. Item 6. The V-Horan grazing dispute. She listened to it. She did not need to, but she listened. 2 V-Horan delegates argued about land boundaries on a planet she had never heard of. 3 other delegates offered opinions. A vote was taken. A decision was recorded. 40 minutes for a grazing dispute. Item 7. The session chair. A tall Dreshelly with gray-green skin and reading glasses she did not need, cleared her throat. Item 7. The human delegation's petition for tier reevaluation, submitted 19 months ago. Admiral Voss, you may address the chamber. Voss stood. The room looked at her. All 7 species, 43 delegates, the full weight of the Galactic Alliance in one room, looking at a human woman standing 14 meters from the center and 3 rows back. She did not walk to the speaker's podium. She spoke from where she was. The human delegation withdraws its petition, she said. Effective immediately, humanity also withdraws from the Galactic Alliance. All membership agreements, defense pacts, resource treaties, and cooperative frameworks are hereby terminated. Our legal team will transmit the formal instrument to all member governments within the hour. Thank you. She sat back down. The room was very quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens when a room does not yet understand what it heard. The Dreshley session chair looked at her notes. Two delegates leaned together and whispered. A Tharan junior diplomat dropped his translation earpiece and did not pick it up. Velkath was the one who broke the silence. He laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was almost warm, the laugh of a man who has seen young civilizations do dramatic things before and has learned that they almost always walk it back within a week. It was a patient laugh, a knowing laugh, the laugh of 400 years of being right. "Let them go," he said, loud enough for the news feeds. "Humans are a footnote with delusions." 17 news feeds, on the record, every word. Voss picked up the withdrawal instrument from the table in front of her. She signed it. She used her left hand, which she always did for documents that mattered, because her right hand had signed too many things that meant nothing. She picked up her thermos. She stood and she walked to the chamber doors and she walked through them, and she did not look back. Behind her, the session chair cleared her throat. "Item 8, she said, "afternoon recess." The withdrawal instrument sat alone on the human delegation table, 14 meters from center, 3 rows back. The delegates filed out around it. Nobody moved it. Nobody picked it up. It sat there for 6 hours. The cleaning staff found it that evening when they came to polish the floor. The galaxy did not fall apart the next day. That was the thing nobody talks about afterward, how normal everything looked at first. The trade routes still ran. The stations still lit up. The diplomatic cycles turned the way they always had, slow and certain, like old machinery that has been running so long it has forgotten there was ever a hand that started it. Commander Juno Park watched all of it from a window on the Tharan hub station Velsorath, and drank bad coffee, and wrote her daily observer report, and waited for someone in the Alliance to notice something was wrong. She was not an official representative of anything. Humanity had no official representatives anymore. She was a goodwill observer, which was a title that had been invented specifically for her situation and meant, as far as she could tell, that she had an office with a window and no authority whatsoever. She wrote her reports. She sent them. She assumed someone read them, though she had no evidence of this. She watched. 6 weeks after the withdrawal, the Tharan Medical Consortium ran out of coagulants. This was not a small thing. Tharan biology had a specific problem with blood clotting after surgery, something in their cellular structure that their own medicine had never fully solved. For 11 years, they had been buying synthesized coagulants from a human pharmaceutical company called HFY Medical, which had a contract with the Alliance and a manufacturing facility on the human colony world of Newcastle. HFY Medical no longer operated under Alliance licensing. They had politely redirected their supply chain inward, as was their right, as was the right of any company no longer bound by Alliance trade agreements. They sent a very professional letter. They wished the Tharan Consortium well. The Tharan Medical Consortium did not immediately connect this to the withdrawal. They sent a complaint to the Alliance Trade Office. The Trade Office opened a file. The file was assigned to a deputy coordinator who was already managing 4 other disruptions that week. Park put it in her report. 3 weeks after that, 6 Gellan colony ships missed their resupply window on the Karath corridor. The corridor ran through a stretch of space that was not technically dangerous, not in the way that space with active stars or debris fields is dangerous, but it had to be navigated carefully, because there were 3 gravitational anomalies along its length that didn't show on standard charts. They didn't show on standard charts because they had been manually identified, mapped, and marked by human survey teams 8 years ago. The teams had installed navigation buoys, small, simple things, yellow-painted metal containers with a beacon inside at each anomaly point. The buoys ran on a maintenance cycle of every 4 months. Human maintenance crews, operating under a contract with the Alliance Infrastructure Division, had been running that cycle quietly and without any particular recognition for 8 years. The contract had terminated 30 days after the withdrawal. The buoys had gone dark 3 weeks ago. Nobody had known the buoys existed until they stopped working. Nobody had known humans were maintaining them until there was no one left to maintain them. The 6 Gellan ships rerouted. It added 11 days to their journey. 3 of them had families aboard colony transport, not cargo, and the children spent 11 extra days in the cramped passenger quarters, and the parents spent 11 extra days explaining that everything was fine. Park put this in her report too. She was running out of ways to write. I told you, without writing, I told you. It was around this time that the first reports came in from the outer rim. A Durith colony on a small rock called Vesh-4 had stopped transmitting. Silence from a colony wasn't automatically alarming equipment failed, whether events happened. Sometimes people just got tired of filing check-ins. The Alliance sent an investigation team. The investigation team found the colony. Or they found what was left of it. They filed a report with a classification code Park had never seen before. She looked it up. It was a code that had been created 40 years ago and never used. It meant, nature of threat unknown. She read the report 3 times. She sent a message to Admiral Voss on Newcastle. It was a short message. There's something on the outer rim. You should see the Vesh-4 file if you can get it. She pressed send, and then she sat very still for a moment. Then a message arrived in her inbox from a Tharan junior diplomat named Seville, young, probably 2 decades into a career that usually lasted 3 centuries, the kind of young that hasn't yet learned to keep fear out of written text. It read, Commander Park, I hope I am not overstepping. I have a question I do not know how to ask through official channels. How did your people learn to make the coagulants work in Tharan biology? Our own biochemists studied the problem for 30 years without a workable solution. Your company solved it in 4. I have been trying to understand how. Park read it twice. She thought about the Kareth corridor buoys. She thought about 11 years of maintenance cycles that nobody noticed until they stopped. She thought about item 7 on an agenda between a grazing dispute and a recess. She wrote back 2 words. We asked. She did not explain what she meant. She clicked send. She got up, got more bad coffee, and came back to her window. That evening, the Alliance recovered the final transmission from Vesh-4, 11 seconds long. The investigation team had cleaned up the audio, removed the interference, isolated the signal. There were no words. There was only a sound, deep and patient and very large, like something that had all the time in the universe, and had simply decided that now was when it would start. Park listened to it once. She did not sleep well that night. The Verk swarm took 4 systems in 9 weeks. This was the number the Alliance War Council kept returning to. 4 systems, 9 weeks. They had run the projections 17 times and the projections kept saying the same thing. It should not have been possible. The Alliance had superior numbers, superior firepower. 7 different species of soldiers trained in 7 different styles of war, combined into a military force that had been called, in various Alliance documents, the most capable defensive coalition in the known galaxy. The swarm had not read those documents. It moved through the first Alliance fleet like water through a net, not because the fleet was weak, but because the fleet had been built to fight things that made sense. The swarm did not make sense. It did not have a command structure that could be targeted. It did not have supply lines that could be cut. It did not retreat when it should have retreated, and it did not advance when it should have advanced, and it ate 2 planets in the Dreshal system, while the Alliance War Council was still debating what formation to use. 4 systems, 9 weeks. The Council met in emergency session. They argued for 6 hours. They reached 3 decisions and reversed 2 of them before morning. It was Velkath who finally said what everyone in the room already knew, and nobody wanted to be the first to say, "We need to speak with the humans." The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of agreement. The sharp, tight quiet of people who remember laughing at something that is no longer funny. Velkath was given the assignment, which was the universe's way of having a sense of humor. He traveled to Newcastle alone. No delegation, no ceremony. The trip took 4 days, and he spent most of them standing at the window of his transit cabin, looking at stars he had seen before but which somehow looked different now. He was 400 years old. He had outlasted empires. He had watched species rise and collapse and rise again. He had never, in 400 years, felt the particular sensation he was feeling now, which was something very close to the understanding that he had been wrong about something important. Newcastle was not what he expected. He had expected something modest, something that said, "We left and we are surviving." Instead, he found a station that hummed with the particular energy of people who are not worried about being watched anymore. The markets were running. The research departments had lights on at all hours. Children were in the corridors, which they never were on Alliance stations because Alliance regulations did not allow children in corridor zones during operational hours. He stood in the arrival bay and looked at it and felt something he could not immediately name. He asked for Admiral Voss. He waited 47 minutes. He sat in a chair in a small waiting room and he waited. Nobody came to offer him anything. Nobody explained the delay. A human administrative assistant nodded at him once when she passed the door, and that was the only acknowledgement that he was there. He waited. Voss arrived with a thermos in her hand. She was in a plain gray uniform, no decorations, no rank insignia except the small pin on her collar. She looked exactly the same as she had in the Alliance chamber, except for something around her eyes, something that had relaxed. He realized, in the same way a person's shoulders relax when they step out of a house that was slowly being too loud for too long. She sat across from him. She did not offer him anything to drink. He delivered the request. He had prepared it carefully. Alliance Legal had spent 2 weeks writing it, making sure it was technically a mutual defense framework proposal, and not the other thing it actually was. He read it the way he had practiced, clearly, calmly, without any suggestion of what it had cost to be in this room making this ask. Voss listened. She was very still while he spoke, the kind of still that is not calm, the kind of still that is a decision being made underneath the surface. When he finished, she did not respond immediately. She put her thermos down on the table between them. "You laughed," she said. "Admiral." 17 news feeds, on the record. He did not look away from her. 400 years had taught him at least that much. "Yes," he said. "I laughed." She looked at him across the table. Outside the window of the small room, Newcastle continued its hum. Someone was laughing in the corridor. Real laughter, the kind that comes from not being watched. "I know," said Voss. Something in the room shifted. She picked up her thermos. She took a slow drink. She set it back down. "I'll need the full swarm data," she said. "Every engagement record, everything your doctrine team filed, everything they decided not to file, every communication log from the Vesh 4 investigation. All of it." Velkath looked at her. She was already solving it. She had not said yes. She had made no agreement, signed nothing, promised nothing. She was simply already working on the problem, because that was what she did with problems, and it occurred to him with a slow and uncomfortable clarity that this was exactly what the Alliance had always taken for granted. Not the firepower, not the soldiers. This, the reflex. "I can have it transmitted within the hour," he said. "Good," she stood up. "I'll be in touch." She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. She did not turn around. "Velkath," she said. "Admiral." "Next time you feel like laughing," she said, "count to 400 first." She left. He sat alone in the small waiting room on Newcastle and listened to someone laugh in the corridor outside and thought about 400 years and how it apparently had not been quite long enough. Commander Juno Park had been given command of the joint operation for reasons that the Alliance War Council phrased very carefully in official documents, and that everyone in the room understood very simply. She was the best they had, and they were no longer in a position to argue about it. She accepted the command with the same expression she used for most things, a kind of calm that looked like boredom to people who didn't know her, and looked like something else entirely to the people who did. She read the full swarm data on the 4-day transit to the V-Horn corridor. She read it twice. She made notes in the margins of her printed copy because she thought better on paper, a habit that the 3 Alliance staff members assigned to her command ship found strange, and the 1 human crew member found completely normal. The corridor was where it would happen. She had decided this before she finished the first read. The swarm had moved through it twice already, using it as a passage between the outer rim and the inner systems. The Alliance had tried to stop it both times with direct engagement. Both times the swarm had simply moved around the Alliance forces the way a river moves around rocks, not fighting the obstacle, just going elsewhere. You couldn't stop it head-on. It didn't have a head. But it had a pattern. Every living thing has a pattern, even things that don't seem to think. She had found it on page 47 of the engagement logs, buried in the data that the Alliance Doctrine team had filed under inconclusive. The swarm moved toward density, toward clusters. It was drawn to concentration, which made sense because wherever life concentrated, there was more to consume. Which meant you could move it, if you knew how to look like a concentration. She explained this to the joint commanders on her first briefing call. There were 7 of them, 2 Tharan fleet admirals, a Gellan squadron leader, 3 others from species she had worked alongside before. They listened. They were quiet for a moment. Then they asked her to explain what she meant by, "We let it catch us 3 times on purpose." She explained it again. They were quiet for longer this time. The operation began 4 days later. The first engagement went almost exactly as she had planned. Human and Alliance ships moved into the corridor in a tight formation, concentrated, visible, exactly the kind of cluster the swarm responded to. The swarm came. Park ordered a retreat when the swarm was 70% committed. The Alliance commanders sent her a joint formal objection via the command channel, nodding that retreating from an engaged enemy was against established doctrine. She read the objection, she filed it, she retreated anyway. The swarm followed, which was what she needed it to do, and it extended itself along a line slightly further east than its previous movements, which was also what she needed it to do. The second engagement was the same, a different position, a different direction of retreat, another formal objection from the joint commanders. She sent back a single line, "Cool, great, love that for you." One of the Tharan admirals asked his staff officer what that phrase meant. The staff officer said he wasn't entirely sure. The third engagement, the swarm, came faster. It had learned not the way people learn, but the way a current learns the shape of a riverbed, wearing the path smooth with repetition. It expected the concentration. It expected the retreat. It had started to anticipate, which was exactly what she had been waiting for. She let it catch them. Not badly, not catastrophically. She let the swarm reach the rear of the formation, let it feel the shape of its own success, let it think it had found the pattern. And then she scattered the formation in 5 directions at once, which the swarm had not anticipated, because the swarm had learned that humans retreat in one direction, and this was 5 and sudden and wrong. It hesitated. 3 seconds. That was all she needed. The fourth engagement was not a retreat. She brought everything in from the position she had spent 3 fights establishing. The flanking squadrons that had been repositioning under cover of each retreat. The long-range units that had spent 3 engagements getting into place without the swarm noticing, because the swarm had been watching the retreats. The swarm's communication nodes were exposed on its eastern edge. They had been moving that way for 3 engagements. She had known they would be there. She hit them all at once. The swarm did not collapse, but it stopped, and then it pulled back, which it had never done before in any of the 4 systems it had taken in any engagement since it had arrived. It pulled back. The corridor was clear in 11 hours. Afterward, a Tharan fleet commander opened a channel to Park's ship. He was older, dignified, the kind of man who chose his words with the same care he chose everything else. She could hear him building the sentence in the silence before he spoke. "Commander," he said, "that was." He stopped. She waited. "Your losses were minimal," he said finally. "Yeah," said Park. She closed the channel. She sat in her command chair and looked at the engagement map for a long time. She thought about Vesh-4. She thought about the Kareth corridor buoys, those small yellow painted things that nobody knew existed until they stopped working. 8 years of maintenance cycles, quiet and unremarked, and the Jellan children spent 11 extra days in cramped quarters because the buoys went dark. She thought about all the things that go unnoticed until they stop. She opened a channel to Voss on Newcastle. "What do we actually want out of this?" she said. There was a pause. "Ask me after," said Voss. "After what?" "After they understand that question better than we do." Park closed the channel. She pulled up the next engagement map. There was still work to do. The Verk swarm did not end. This was the first thing Voss put into the preliminary ceasefire documentation, and it was the first thing the Alliance legal team asked her to remove. They wanted the document to say the swarm had been defeated. It was cleaner. It was the kind of language that looked good on official records and helped people sleep at night. She did not remove it. She told the Alliance legal team, calmly and without much elaboration, that there was a difference between a thing being defeated and a thing retreating, and that the difference mattered because one of them meant the war was over and one of them meant the war was paused. She told them she knew the difference because her people had retreated before, had been retreating in various ways for 32 years, and she was very familiar with what retreat looked like from both sides. The language stayed in. The negotiations took 8 months. They were held on a station called Velmora, which was neutral in the technical sense that it was not owned by any single species, though the architecture was Tharan, and the staff was mostly Tharan, and the food in the dining hall was, as Park noted to no one in particular, extremely Tharan in a way that seems intentional. Park was there as part of the human delegation, not as a soldier now. The fighting was over, for the moment, but as something harder to name. A witness, maybe. Someone who had been watching long enough to know which details mattered. She watched the table placement discussion on day 1. It was not a long discussion. It should not have been a discussion at all. The table positions were a logistical matter, the kind of thing a station coordinator usually handled the night before. But the Tharan block had submitted a formal seating arrangement that placed the human delegation at secondary status, which was a careful neutral phrase meaning 2 rows back and to the left. The human delegation submitted a counter-proposal, center dais, co-primary status. The Tharan block objected. 3 other species deferred to the Tharan block, as they had been doing for 200 years, the way water defers to a slope. Not because anyone made a rule about it, but because it had happened long enough that everyone had forgotten it was a choice. Velketh overruled his own block. He did it in a single line, in a procedural notation filed through the station's administrative system at 6 in the morning before the session began. No announcement, no speech, no ceremony, just a notation. The human delegation's table was to be repositioned to center dais co-primary status effective immediately. By the time the other delegates arrived for the morning session, the table had been moved. Nobody commented on it. The session began. Park watched the whole thing and didn't say a word. The negotiations moved slowly, the way negotiations always do when the people at the table are trying to write something that will matter in 200 years. There were arguments about the resource treaties, which ones would be reinstated, under what terms, with what controls. There were arguments about military cooperation, about defense pacts, about who owed who what and how to calculate the cost of things that had never been on any invoice. Nobody knew how to put a number on 8 years of navigation buoy maintenance. Nobody tried. The swarm data was shared in full, every engagement log, every analysis, everything humanity had learned in the Corridor campaign. Voss insisted on this. She had the legal team write it into the framework itself. Full intelligence sharing, no proprietary classifications on threat data. Some Alliance delegates objected to this on the grounds that it reduced their strategic advantage. Voss asked them, very calmly, what strategic advantage they had had against the swarm before humanity re-engaged. The objection was withdrawn. 8 months, then the final session, the signing. Voss stood at center dais, which was where she stood now, because the table had been moved, because Velkath had filed a notation at 6 in the morning, because some things change in ways that don't make the news feeds but matter more than anything that does. The signing instrument was in front of her, real paper. The Alliance liked real paper for formal occasions. She picked up the pen. She used her left hand. Different document, same hand. The hand that had signed the withdrawal 2 years ago, in a chamber that smelled like 700 years of other people's decisions. The hand that had closed one door was now opening another one, and she was very aware of this, and she let herself be aware of it for exactly 1 moment, and then she signed her name and set the pen down. Across the room, Park watched. She thought about the corridor. She thought about the Tharan commander who couldn't finish his sentence, who had stood with all his dignity and his 4 centuries of his people's history, and had simply run out of words, because the words he needed were not in any language that had never had to ask for help. She thought about the buoys. She always thought about the buoys. She thought about what it meant to maintain something quietly for years, to do the work without the recognition, to keep the lights on in a corridor nobody ever thanked you for lighting, and what it meant to stop, and to watch the corridor go dark, and to wait until someone noticed. They had noticed. It had taken a war and 8 months of negotiations, and 1 procedural notation filed at 6 in the morning, but they had noticed. Voss set down the pen. From across the room, the Dreshley session chair announced that the framework had been signed, and the session was concluded, and humanity was restored to the Alliance as a full co-primary member, and 17 news feeds were recording all of it. Park stood up. She picked up her jacket from the back of her chair. She thought about all of it, the chamber and the table and the corridor and the buoys, and the 11 seconds of audio from Vesh 4, and the Tharan commander who couldn't find his words, and she held all of it for 1 quiet second. Hell of a thing, she thought. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. She put on her jacket and walked toward the door, and outside the windows of Velmora Station, the stars looked the same as they always had, cold and far away and completely indifferent, and somewhere out past the rim, something vast and patient was still waiting, and humanity was back at the table. They had work to do.